If you're 60 with $800,000 in your RRSP, your default plan is probably take the minimum later. And that default could cost you over $100,000 in extra taxes. Not because you did anything wrong, because the system is built in a way that punishes the people who wait. Most retirees never see it coming, not until they're in their 70s watching their RRIF withdrawal get taxed at 33%, while their 60s were sitting there with empty 15% brackets that nobody used. The real stake here isn't how much you saved, it's how much you keep. The difference between withdrawing at 15% now versus 33% later isn't a rounding error. On a $600,000 RRSP, that gap adds up to more than $100,000 over a 25-year retirement. So why does the wait as long as possible instinct backfire? Because most people don't think about income stacking. CPP comes in. RRIF minimums kick in. And suddenly, every dollar of RRSP money you delayed has to squeeze into a bracket that's already full. That's the trap. And the reason most people fall into it is a belief I want to challenge directly today, the zero tax year myth. If you've got an RRSP and you're not sure whether to wait or withdraw early, hit subscribe. I go through strategies like this every week, no sales pitches. Just the math that matters for Canadian retirees. Let me show you exactly how skipping $57,000 of withdrawals in your 60s can cost you $110,000 by age 85. In 2026, the federal income tax rate on the first $57,375 of taxable income is 15%. That bracket is sitting there right now, and if you're retired with no pension, no CPP and no OAS, a big chunk of it might be empty. If you leave it empty, you're not actually deferring tax. You're trading a 15% bill today for a bigger one later. Here's why. The moment CPP, OAS, and RRIF, mandatory withdrawals, all land at once, those low brackets fill up fast. Every dollar of RRSP money you held back now has to come out at 20.5% or higher. For every $55,000 you delayed, that bracket difference costs you roughly $10,000 more in tax in a single year. This is the income stacking trap, and it's the part almost nobody explains clearly. Your RRSP gave you a tax deduction when you put the money in. That was the deal. You paid less tax then, and you'd pay it later when you withdrew. The problem isn't the deduction. The problem is when later becomes a year with 5 or 6 income sources all competing for the same low brackets. At age 72, with a large RRSP converted to a RRIF, the government requires you to start taking minimum withdrawals, whether you want the money or not. The rate at 72 is 5.4% of your account value from the prior year. On a $650,000 RRIF, that's $35,100 you must take out, must declare as income, and must pay tax on. Stack that with CPP, stack that with OAS. If you've also got some investment income or part-time work, you can find yourself above $95,323, which is where the OAS clawback starts in 2026. At that point, CRA takes back 15 cents of every OAS dollar above that threshold. So you've got 3 forces pushing your income up at the same time, and very little room to maneuver. Now, I want to be direct about something. If you built up a large RRSP over your working years, your tax bill in your 70s is not a sign you did something wrong. It's a sign you saved diligently in a system that rewarded you for it. The strategy worked exactly as designed. But the design also means the government gets its share eventually. And without a plan, that share is bigger than it needs to be. You get to decide which year you pay. You just need to make that decision before the stacking happens. Let me give you a quick picture of the brackets, so you can see where the pressure points are. In 2026, the first $57,375 of federal taxable income is taxed at 15%. From $57,376, up to $114,750, the rate jumps to 20.5%. The 33% rate doesn't kick in until income exceeds $253,000 federally. But combined federal and provincial rates in Ontario can push your effective marginal rate past 43% well before that. If you're sitting in your early 60s with a $700,000 RRSP and your only income is $30,000 a year from part-time work or savings, you have roughly $27,000 of unused 15% bracket space every year. That space doesn't carry over. Each year you leave it empty is a year that money will eventually cost you more. And that's the instinct problem. Most people here defer your RRSP and think that's the disciplined move. Let it grow. Don't pay tax until you have to. But in a progressive tax system, deferring into a crowded year isn't patience. It's just paying more tax on the same money. The smarter play is what some advisors call the RRSP Meltdown, or what I prefer to think of as the controlled drawdown. It's not about melting anything down in a panic. It's 3 deliberate steps that let you fill your low brackets on purpose, while you still can. The controlled drawdown comes down to 3 steps. None of them are complicated, but they have to happen in the right order and at the right time. Step 1. Target your low bracket years. The window most people have is roughly ages 60 to 71, the years after you stop working, but before CPP, OAS, and RRIF minimums all start piling in together. If you're not taking CPP yet, and your employment income has stopped, your taxable income might be $20,000 to $30,000 a year. That leaves a lot of the 15% bracket empty. You fill it deliberately by withdrawing more from your RRSP than you strictly need. Step 2. Recycle the excess. You're withdrawing $70,000 but only spending $45,000. The after-tax gap, roughly $12,000 to $13,000, goes into your TFSA, not back into the market in a taxable account, into the TFSA, where it grows sheltered and comes out tax-free when you eventually need it. This is how the strategy compounds over time. You're not just reducing the RRSP tax bomb, you're building a clean, tax-free pool alongside it. Step 3. Delay CPP and OAS. This one feels counterintuitive. Most people want those checks to start as soon as possible. But delaying CPP to age 70 increases your monthly payment by 42%. Delaying OAS to 70 adds another 36%. The reason to delay isn't just about the higher payment, it's because every year you delay CPP and OAS is another year where your only income source is the RRSP drawdown you control. That keeps your income stack low, your bracket spacious, and your average tax rate manageable. Let me put numbers on this so it's not abstract. Take Dave. He's 60, single, living in Ontario, with $800,000 in his RRSP, no defined benefit pension. He retires at 65 and decides to delay CPP and OAS to 70. Between ages 65 and 71, 6 years, he withdraws $70,000 per year from his RRSP. His average federal plus provincial tax rate on that income works out to about 17.5%. That's roughly $12,250 in tax per year. After tax, he keeps about $57,750. He only needs $45,000 for his actual living expenses. So the extra $12,000 or so goes directly into his TFSA every year. By the time he hits 71, his RRSP has dropped to around $300,000, assuming 5% annual growth on what's left while he's drawing down. Now compare that to the default approach, doing nothing, waiting for mandatory RRIF withdrawals at 72. In that scenario, his account grows to roughly $650,000 by age 72. The RRIF minimum at that point is 5.4%, which forces out about $35,100. That sounds manageable until you add CPP and OAS on top. Suddenly, his annual income is pushing past $80,000, and every dollar of that $35,100 is being taxed at a higher rate than Dave's controlled withdrawals ever were. Over a retirement from age 65 to 90, the difference in total after tax money available, same RRSP, same return assumptions, is about $112,000 in Dave's favor. I used to think drawing down an RRSP early was paying tax you didn't need to. I felt the same instinct most people do. Why write a check to CRA before you have to? Then I ran the numbers for a client who was 61 with $900,000 in his RRSP. That client was my dad. When I saw the difference, over $120,000 across 25 years, I changed my entire approach. We set up a simple plan. Each year, target a $67,000 withdrawal, put the surplus into his TFSA. The first year it felt strange. He wrote a check to CRA for about $9,800 in tax. He wasn't thrilled, but by year 5 his perspective had shifted. He said to me, "I get it now. That money would have cost me triple if I'd left it." That's when the math stops being a spreadsheet and starts feeling real. But here's the question I get asked most often at this point. What if the market drops 30% right when you start withdrawing? Does the whole plan fall apart? Here's the scenario. You've just retired at 65, you've committed to the controlled drawdown, and in the first year the market drops 30%. What happens to the plan? For most people, the answer is they stop. They look at their RRSP balance, see it's dropped from $800,000 to $560,000, and decide they can't afford to keep withdrawing. So they pivot. They start drawing from their TFSA, or from a non-registered account, or from whatever feels less painful in the moment. The RRSP sits there, recovering, which seems smart. Protect the RRSP, use other money, wait for the market to come back. The problem is what happens at the other end. By the time they hit 71, the RRSP has recovered and grown, and now their balance is even larger than it would have been under the original plan. Mandatory RRIF minimums are higher. CPP and OAS are already running. The income stack is exactly what they were trying to avoid, and now they have less flexibility to fix it. According to Morningstar Canada research from 2024, a 30% portfolio drop in the first year of retirement, combined with forced or panicked withdrawals, can reduce a portfolio's effective lifespan by 7 to 10 years. That's not a small number. That's the difference between money that outlasts you and money that doesn't. The way to protect against this is a cash wedge, and you build it before the downturn happens, not after. A cash wedge is simply 2 years' worth of planned withdrawals held in cash-like investments inside your RRSP or RRIF. In Dave's case, that's about $140,000 sitting in GICs or a money market fund, inside the registered account, not outside it. When the market drops, Dave doesn't have to sell equities at the bottom. He pulls his $70,000 annual withdrawal from the cash portion. The equity side of his portfolio stays invested and participates in the recovery. The key point here is that the cash wedge doesn't change the tax strategy at all. Dave still withdraws the same amount. The income stack still gets managed the same way. The only thing the wedge does is remove the panic variable, the moment where fear overrides the plan. By the time Dave hits 71, his RRSP is still drawn down close to target. The market correction was a detour, not a derailment. That's the difference between a plan that survives a crash and one that gets quietly abandoned. But there's one more barrier that stops people from even getting started. And honestly, it's not about the math at all. There's a deep emotional reward in seeing a line on your tax return that reads $0 tax payable. It feels like a win. You kept your money. The government didn't get its hands on it this year. That feeling is real, and it makes complete sense. Your whole working life, you did everything you could to reduce your tax bill. Maximizing RRSP contributions, tracking deductions, splitting income where possible. Paying zero tax feels like the system finally working in your favor. But in retirement, that reward signal can lead you exactly the wrong direction. Psychologists call it loss aversion, the tendency to weigh avoiding a loss more heavily than gaining an equivalent benefit. In the context of retirement taxes, it shows up as, I'd rather pay nothing this year than pay $8,000 now, even if waiting means I'll pay $24,000 later. The loss today feels more concrete than the larger loss years away, so people protect the zero. They avoid RRSP withdrawals in their early retirement years. They feel responsible. And then in their 70s, the income stack hits, and the bill arrives, bigger, less controllable, and harder to manage. If that sounds like your instinct, you're not doing anything irrational. The impulse to defer tax is correct in almost every other context in financial planning. What changes in retirement is that your future years aren't empty. They fill up with guaranteed income that you can't turn off, and that income occupies the very brackets you were saving for. Here's the reframe that helps most people shift their thinking. Picture your low tax brackets as parking spots. Right now, in your early 60s, those spots are empty. You can pull in RRSP withdrawals and pay 15% on them, or you can leave the spots empty. The moment CPP and OAS arrive, those spots get taken permanently. Your RRSP money, now coming out as RRIF minimums, has to park wherever it can find room. And that's usually in the 20.5% or higher spot. You don't get to reclaim the empty spots later. The only question is who fills them, you on purpose, or the government's schedule by default. I want to be straightforward here. I don't know every detail of your situation. If you have a defined benefit pension that already fills your low brackets, the math may look different. If your health is a serious concern and you have genuine reasons to expect a shorter retirement, the calculus changes. This strategy isn't a universal prescription, but if you're a typical Canadian retiree in your 60s no DB pension, a sizable RRSP, CPP, and OAS still ahead of you, then this is the math that applies. And the sooner you start filling those brackets deliberately, the more of your own money you keep. So let's make it practical. Here are the 5 levers you can pull starting this year. Here are the 5 levers. You don't need to pull all 5 at once, but understanding each one gives you a clear picture of what the strategy actually looks like in practice. Lever 1, compare your current marginal tax rate to your future one. Pull out your 2025 tax return. Look at your effective and marginal rates. Then estimate what your income will look like at age 72 when CPP, OAS, and RRIF minimums are all running at the same time. If your future marginal rate is higher than your current one, and for most people with a sizable RRSP, it will be you have a clear signal to start withdrawing now. Lever 2, set a target withdrawal amount. For most people between ages 60 and 71, the sweet spot is somewhere between $55,000 and $70,000 per year from the RRSP. The goal is to fill the lower federal brackets while keeping your total taxable income below $95,323, the 2026 OAS clawback threshold. You want to stay under that number until you're past 70 and actually receiving OAS Lever 3. Build a cash wedge. Before you start withdrawing, move roughly 2 years' worth of planned withdrawals, somewhere around $110,000 to $140,000, into GICs or a money market fund inside your RRSP. This stays in the registered account. Its only job is to make sure that when markets drop, you don't have to sell equities to fund your withdrawal. You draw from the cash, the equity side recovers, and the strategy stays on track. Lever 4, recycle the surplus into your TFSA. If you're withdrawing $70,000 a year, but only spending $45,000, the after-tax gap doesn't have to sit in a bank account collecting little. Put it in your TFSA. It grows sheltered. When you need it later, it comes out with no tax and no impact on OAS. Over a decade, that builds into a meaningful pool. Lever 5, delay CPP and OAS to 70. For every month you delay CPP past 65, your payment increases by 0.7%. From 65 to 70, that's a 42% permanent increase. OAS increases by 0.6% per month of delay, another 36% if you wait to 70. The higher payments replace some of the RRSP money you've drawn down, and the delay buys you almost a full decade of years where your only large income source is the RRSP drawdown you're controlling. 5 levers. None of them require a complicated financial instrument or a loan strategy. They require a plan and some patience in the early years. But there's one thing most people overlook when they run this math, and it has nothing to do with your retirement spending. It has to do with what happens to whatever is left when you're gone. The controlled drawdown isn't about avoiding tax. You're going to pay tax either way. The question is whether you pay it in a bracket you chose or a bracket that was chosen for you. By withdrawing in your 60s, you fill the 15% and 20.5% federal brackets on purpose. You reduce the size of your RRIF before mandatory minimums kick in. You keep your income below the OAS clawback line, and you build up a TFSA alongside it that you or your family can access without any tax consequence. The part most people don't think about until it's too late. If you pass away with a large RRIF balance and no surviving spouse to roll it over to, CRA treats the entire remaining balance as income in the year of death. In Ontario, that means up to 53% of it can go to tax. A controlled drawdown shrinks that balance over time, and the money you moved into TFSA along the way passes to your beneficiaries, completely tax-free. You worked your whole career to build that account. A plan to draw it down deliberately isn't a loss. It's how you make sure your family gets the benefit of it, not CRA. If you're over 55 with an RRSP and you don't want to leave a tax bomb for your family, hit subscribe. I put out new strategies for Canadian retirees every week. No products, no upsells, just the math that matters. And I'd genuinely like to hear from you. What's your biggest concern about drawing from your RRSP early? Is it the tax hit, the market risk, or something else? Drop it in the comments. I read everyone and use them for future videos. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.